All right, so today we're going to dive into the metaverse and we're going to do it in the way of fashion. Now, we've talked about fashion here on our show many times and how that plays into metaverse projects, how NFTs are eventually going to evolve into the fashion space, maybe how big brands are even moving into how the digital world is truly transforming how design and fashion is going to be done. So we'll jump into all of that good stuff. My name is Paul Barrow. Welcome back into the metaverse. Let's jump into this today with, of course, a company that I think is interesting, and it's one that we've been looking at for quite some time, and that is the Fabricant. I want to welcome Kerry Murphy on as the founder and CEO. Great to have you, Kerry.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I did see a few breakdowns from you about digital fashion before, so I'm happy to
Yep.
be here and take a little bit of a more deeper dive.
It's interesting. We've seen a lot of interest in the videos as we start to explore kind of NFT usage and how fashion is starting to play a role in that. It's much bigger than I think a lot of people have really given it credit for. And then we're also seeing this real world application from a lot of new designers, a lot of, I think, artists in the genre of fashion and design, especially from a digital standpoint. Kerry, tell us a little bit about the Fabricant, how you guys got started. What was the main mission that you were trying to achieve in jumping in?
Yeah, great question. The Fabricant really started with a dream, I would say, in 2016, out of the necessity of doing something extremely creative and something that would be impactful for the world. The fashion industry was quite in dire need of digital transformation, and that was the time that I was working in advertising and film and visual effects at that point still. And I was just really looking for other avenues for my creativity back then. And fashion presented itself as an opportunity when I met my co-founder, Amber, who's a digital-only fashion designer and the first fashion designer to ever graduate with a digital-only portfolio. For me, I thought that was the norm in the fashion industry, but apparently it
Mhm.
wasn't. So it was quite easy to predict fashion was going to go through digital transformation. So we formed a so-called digital fashion house in 2018 with this hunch and just hoping for the best that the timing was right. And ever since 2018, we've been growing every single year. We sold the world's first digital only garment on the blockchain for $9,500 back then. It was for 54 ETH, so around $150,000 these days. And
Yeah.
then we got to work with Virtual Abloh during the pandemic. Last year, we were the first digital fashion house to have a cover item on a Vogue magazine. And this year, we have just closed our seed Series A fundraising for $14 million. So digital fashion is definitely on the rise. And yeah, we're dead middle of it. And I couldn't be more bullish on it than ever before.
Well, NFTs have obviously exploded this year. I think this year is kind of become the coming out party for a lot of different projects. You see something like Artifact and what Nike has been able to do. We're starting to see a whole revolution around what design really has become and could become in the coming years. You guys, of course, got a funding round. What is the main thing that you guys are focused on now in terms of the tech and or the design studio itself? What's kind of the next steps for you in terms of coming out with even more innovation?
Yeah, great question. Something that we're ideating every single day of where should we really focus on when the landscape is so full of opportunities. It's very easy to kind of get lost in the chaos and the noise. Uh, Everything that Artifact has done is fantastic. You know, I'm a big fan of those guys. They're really dominating like a virtual sneaker, virtual identity, connecting Nike was a great move. Us, it's really be focusing on the digital only fashion industry. So not focusing on the physical at all, but really reimagining and building what the digital only fashion industry can be, because we're true believers that digital only fashion is going to be way bigger than physical fashion. So for the next steps, what we're looking at here, the Fabricant Studio, this is just an MVP. This is a prototype. This is the
Yeah.
starting point of a much larger roadmap. So it's still a closed product for a small group of people. We're launching what we call seasons with multiple different collaborations. This happens to be with a 3D designer, Steffi Fung. We have one coming up with World of Women campaign, and just slowly, just getting ready for mainstream adoption. And we really see this starting to take off at the end of 2022.
So you're mentioning a few things that are happening here. Digital only. We've talked about this many times in terms of trends, in terms of value around NFTs, but also the IP side of things, because this, of course, could apply to full 3D rendering graphics within movies. A lot more we'll see in terms of the digital art world as well as the digital fashion world at the same time. When you look at the kind of the landscape, because this obviously is early days right now, where would you guys be focused on? Do you feel like it's just mostly toward NFT and the connection into metaverse and gaming? Or do you think there is some connection into other IP out there, whether it's movies or other digital aspects of rendering and approaches like that?
Absolutely. I love that question. And that's, again, a creative challenge. Where does digital fashion apply, or where does it create the most value right now? NFT games, of course, is a no-brainer. We don't focus so much on the traditional gaming industry, simply because it's a different business model. It's a different mindset. So I always focus on NFT games. Then we talk a lot about AR as a utility. So, we're partnering up with Snap, for instance, and social media plays a big role. And then when we're talking about entertainment side of things, we start talking about K-pop, so Korean pop and virtual avatars coming out of Asia. We're of course talking to a lot of the big music industry groups, such as Warner Group, Warner Music, Universal Music. Those guys are really bullish on the space as well. Of course, movies are starting to look into it. So definitely entertainment will be that first frontier. But honestly, I think it's going to really just start taking off. It's very similar to the smartphone. We couldn't predict what all of these smartphone apps would do. We got an app like Uber. So we're constantly really trying to ideate like 10, 20 years from now, how does digital fashion become a practicality in our lives, where we one day just wake up and first thing that comes to mind, what am I going to wear digitally today? So it's definitely an exciting creative exercise and conversation that we have here every day.
One thing I'm looking at and seeing more and more as we talk to a lot of CEO and dev leads in the metaverse side of things here on our show is they talk a lot about kind of the renderings that are going to take place around use cases within metaverse applications. And that's going to obviously include fashion, but there's obviously another layer of NFT utility tools. When it comes to fashion, this is something that we're seeing in terms of a trend right now with NFTs, and this is this whole approach toward utility. There's been many people that have applied utility for access. There's some NFT, really creative NFT projects out there that are starting to somewhat morph as the utility and the NFT age. How would that apply, or could that apply in the fashion space? Because fashion a lot of time changes with style and season and all these kind of things. Will you guys be doing anything in that area in terms of morphing a design over its lifetime, or are these going to be like one-offs where it's a fashion piece, much like a traditional designer, and that's what it is forever? What kind of creativity are you seeing coming in that direction?
That's the exciting part about digital fashion. It's a very unexplored field. So all the ideas that you just mentioned, very valid. Plus more. It's just about what is the idea that we can have, and how well can we execute it. That's always the question. So we're looking at our resources, because there's a big IT foundation that's really necessary. So sometimes it's very easy to have ideas, but it might not work very technically. So it's a
Mhm.
constant iteration between creativity and technology that we really have to play around with. So to really think about what are the perks and the rewards simply by owning digital only fashion, that's definitely something that we're exploring. We're looking at all the other NFT projects that are in the space, really just starting to see like how do they evolve beyond the art itself. And I think that's a
Yeah.
common misconception with the true normies, that they're just so focused on the art, when of course it's everything that's around it. It's the community, it's the utility, it's the perks, the rewards, the access. We're talking about all of those things, and really seeing how can we look at it from a fashion mindset and the fashion perspective, which of course is very different from the other NFT industries, especially kind of like this crypto bro industry. The type of things that they're activating is not necessarily what we think is truly what we call so-called fashion. So we're definitely going to start having a lot of activations in the coming months that is more of an exploration and experimentation to see what works, what doesn't work, who is our target audience, how much are they willing to pay, how do we create traction, like kind of like those typical SaaS products, but then really putting it into the Web3 mindset and thinking.
All right, so I want to thank our sponsors today, and that, of course, is FTX. If you guys are looking to trade and you want to do it in a way in which you save a ton of money, they have some of the best rates for traders out there. A lot of other things are happening with FTX as well, and that, of course, is their NFT marketplace and a ton of access when you're looking at building a portfolio and you want to look at someone to build it on. FTX is definitely one of the places for you guys to go. Make sure and check out the link below to get access to some of the discounts for FTX. Help the channel out. All right, so you mentioned a few things there I think we should definitely unpack. One, of course, is the Web3 evolution of fashion and design. And we're seeing more IP coming over from traditional design houses, whether it's someone like a Louis Vuitton, or you're seeing things now going into the shoe lineups. Obviously, we've seen Artifact kind of put their stake in the ground. When you look at that, Kerry, do you see digital fashion maybe at some point rivaling what we traditionally see in the traditional fashion and design world as we see the explosion into the metaverse? What are your thoughts on that?
I always see digital only fashion as an added value to what the physical fashion industry is right now. Let's say if we're going to talk about the rivaling side, the rivaling will be which one is more profitable in the end.
Hmm.
And digital will always be more profitable simply because it's more scalable. For the
Yeah.
traditional fashion industry, there's too many challenges for them to truly scale, because they're trying to create renderings of like 6,000 items for one collection, which is yeah, a little bit hard for them to achieve. But because we come from a non-fashion background, all the foundations, the visual effects pipeline that we call it, is new, and it's really catered for our digital only fashion needs. So that's what we're truly focusing on. So even though we have the word fashion in everything that we do, it's actually two different worlds. It's like
Yeah.
parallel worlds coexisting, but not necessarily connected. Especially from what we're doing, we try not to connect to the traditional fashion industry. Simply because they're holding us back. They're holding us back from a vision, from the energy, from the mindset, and truly exploring where are we going towards to in the future. So even though we're really speculating 20, 50, 100, 200 years into the future, we're 100% sure that this is only going to keep growing and really challenging and disrupting how traditional fashion works right now.
This is something that we've had conversations with a lot of influencers, personalities, celebrities, especially on our show, kind of this evolution of the digital framework of what we as humans eventually will evolve to, in the sense of, what is our digital and online experience going to look like in the future? And today it's like this. It's a very flat 2D experience that we're grunting through this through some sort of video transmission. But at some point, we're going to see 3D renderings. We're going to see a lot more integration into metaverse applications, NFT usage, a lot more creativity, which I'm very excited about kind of how that rolls. When you look at those kinds of evolutions and you think about IP and brand connectivity, no, so whether it's an IP scenario where someone assigns you guys an IP and says, hey, go build us, a whole new, design of something that's superhero, for Spider-Man or something of that nature. Or you get into fashion brands that are looking for maybe digital only outlets. How are you guys partnering up, and what are you looking for in terms of partners to grow in the future?
Great question and very relevant to everything that's going on with the Fabricant right now. So the partners that we're looking to work with are really all about mindset. So of course it's has a lot to do with who we want to partner up with. They definitely have to be the world's largest brands who have the visibility and can really create impact. But the mindset is the biggest thing. We really need them to be open into this Web3 thinking, which is more about ecosystem rather than revenue generation, which is really about community participation rather than the community just being a silent observer of what's happening. And most of all, what we're super proud of is that the revenue and the royalty structure that we have in place gets split equally among all participants.
Mm.
And this is something that we found it to be very difficult to be partnering up with traditional big brands from the fashion industry, especially because they're so used to that mental model that they give a product, receive, while we're saying, well, actually, you're just a participant in this economy, and you also need to your royalties equally with all the participants. So this is definitely a hurdle that we need to overcome when it comes to the mindset of working with the brands. And the other one, actually, I had a conversation with one of the most famous fashion brands, and they really want to be in this space. They really want to participate and show themselves that they're also innovative. But when it really comes down to talking to the creative director, who's always the final decision maker, we see that the biggest barriers of entry are there. They say one thing, but their actions show another thing because they're so used to that mindset of like, we're
Yeah.
just going to make a collection, we're going to put it out there, we're going to have our runway show, and then it's on to the next collection. When Web3 is all about longevity, what I drop now, how will that be relevant 1, 5, 10 years from now? Those are the biggest questions that these fashion brands are incapable of answering right now.
Yeah, I think you hit on it, is that it is a dynamic that is a completely different model of thinking. Obviously, with the NFT application and use case scenarios, we'll see with smart contracts, the evolution of royalties, also the evolution of how NFTs and just in general, blockchain is going to change the dynamic of how we deliver products and services in the future. So for fashion brands you're exactly right, they're thinking, hey, let's deliver, a collection. It kind of rolls out. It's very static. It rolls to the next one, and it becomes out of season in 6 months. Where with NFTs and digital design, I feel like this is an evolution that could be just ongoing, and definitely, to your point, really coalescing around communities that could be utilizing and/or repurposing, different aspects of design and themes in a lot of different ways, whether it's metaverse or game usage, as we start to see a lot more going in that direction. So I definitely would agree with you there. Let me talk to you a little bit about the tech, and because this is something that we follow a lot in terms of the design framework. What is the tech like for you guys in terms of what kind of tool sets do you need to be able to build this kind of component? Is it a labor of love, or do you guys have to spend just ridiculous amounts of time? Is it scalable? Can you kind of give me a framework of how you guys are building out from a tech standpoint?
Yeah, great question. My CTO was just here, and of course, we talk about this a lot. Um, it's not rocket science. I typically that's how I start my conversations. When we haven't built anything that nobody else in the world has. However, how we have wired the software together is something completely different. And we've built a few different bridges to help out with the workflow. Now we're talking about an optimized workflow. The next step is a semi-automated workflow, really moving on towards automation. And I tell you what the software that we use, it's very simple. We use Clo 3D, we use Blender, and we use Unreal Engine. Those are the three
Yeah.
main core tools. But we also use Cinema 4D, we use Maya, we use Houdini. We always say that tool is a tool. They all do different things, and we just need to be able to enable to use the tool to tell our stories, to enable our strategy. So these tools are evolving. Of course, we're really a close eye on them because it's very vulnerable for us. If Clo 3D decides to quit tomorrow, we would need to really just figure out like how do we put that into our tech stack. But those are all the conversations that we have. And then another one is, of course, developing on chain. We're using Flow from Dapper Labs right now, and yeah, it's very new for us. So if you think about our team as fashion designers, gaming designers, and blockchain developers, we need to
Hmm.
make sure that those guys are all able to work with each other. So it's kind of it feels like a duct tape solution, but actually it's very sophisticated visual effects pipeline that we've built that is not fully at the scalability of where we want it to be, but we know how that needs to look like. We know what we need to build, and that's what we're really focusing on for the next 2 to 3 years. So we're not even focused on, oh, how can we make a lot of money? How can we generate revenue? We're just like, how can we build a product that will adopt the mainstream, that will onboard the mainstream of people who typically didn't think about digital fashion before. And just because they see a super cool experience, they're like, I want to be part of that. I want to be part of this digital fashion journey. So we're really all about user experience. And again, that experimentation becomes super important because we don't know what that looks like. But we have a very agile team. We have a very agile workflow and high performance team, total growth mindset, and just moving at lightning speed. Those are the most important aspects that we need to keep going with.
Before we get into a couple of last questions here on the technical side, token scenarios, all that, looking at designers and kind of, I guess, the future, because a lot of projects we look at today are really kind of measured by their partnerships and their developers. From a creator standpoint or a designer standpoint, are you guys starting? Can you tell us a little about who they are? And are you developing relationships with some of the bigger designers in the traditional world of fashion?
Yeah. Absolutely, great question, and of course, we want to stay very close to the fashion industry because that's at the core, and we really want to onboard the traditional fashion industry to everything that we're doing. So that conversation is very ongoing, but very slow. I mentioned the challenges that they face right now to really move into the space. So that's why we're focused on a lot of the, let's say, the traditional artists who've already made the move into Web3 because they understand what it's all about. They understand the
Mhm.
mechanics. They understand the language, the culture, simply because it's a completely different world. So that's why we're really just focused on, let's say, several popular artists from the NFT space. This is music. This is traditional art. This is 3D. Um, let's say more the new age fashion brands who are maybe more
Mhm.
metaverse native. Those are the ones that are upcoming. And I tell you, we have a content calendar pretty much full. There's one more slot open. So if anybody watching who thinks they're super cool and wants to partner up for a content calendar, yeah, I would love to just speak to those people. Like I said, the mindset is the most important thing. You gotta have like this big vision of like, hey, where is Web3 going? But you also need to have that tradition and foundation behind you because that's the way we're going to onboard people into the space.
You guys are powered by Flow, which is a popular, platform for NFT development. Why choose Flow as, your partner on this?
Again, a big conversation internally. So we were talking about between ETH, where the community lives, which is much further already, or Flow, which we talk about the triple S, which is speed, scale, security. Those are very
Mhm.
important things for us. We of course auctioned the digital only dress in 2019 together with Dapper Labs. We've always been very close to Dapper Labs. Roham is on the advisory board, but we did make the choice ourselves to say like, okay, Flow makes sense right now. Really betting on the, let's say, the long-term vision of what they're doing, and just being super excited about building on there right now. But for us, we're not religious to one chain. We really want to be chain agnostic and to mint on Solana if they want to mint on Solana, to mint on Ethereum if they want to mint on Ethereum. My CTO Marco always makes it clear that we're not talking about the mobile networks that we're using our phones with. Nobody's like, oh, I'm on AT&T and oh, I'm on T-Mobile. we don't really care as long as it works. And that's how we foresee the future of blockchain as well. Like we're not going to we're not going to be talking about which chains we're on simply because they're going to be interoperable between each other. That's our hypothesis of the future that it's going in. So and that's why we want to stay agile and as agnostic as possible right now.
Yeah, for sure. Last question, Kerry. Any plans for a token? Can we expect Fabricant the token? We're going to call it Fabric, right?
Yes, NFC 100%. It's already in the designs. Not sure about the dates yet, but we're definitely moving forward very fast with that as well.
I like it. Very cool. Kerry, it's been great having you on. Thank you so much for the download. We love to get kind of the insights on where this is going. I'm very intrigued with fashion, especially in the metaverse, as we start to see more applications and use cases. So great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for stopping in.
Thanks so much for having me. Truly appreciate it.
Excellent. All right, so you guys are tuned in over here on the podcast right now. Make sure and tune into our other show, and that's Tech Path Crypto. You can find that over on Spotify or iTunes. But the best of all, and the place you want to be is right here on YouTube. You get a chance to see all these great aspects of our visuals here on Metaverse Insider, but even more so when we do token analysis, and we do a ton of that. You can, of course, catch all that right here on Paul Barron Network. If you guys want to reach me out on Twitter, it's at Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on Metaverse Insider.